All right, welcome back to the Loopcast. We are live. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by another Tom McCluskey, and Kara. So we got a good lineup for you today. First thing that really stuck out on the news, as you know, all three of us are Catholic. We do work for a Catholic organization. We got a survey from Pew Research about United States
if a biological
Catholics.
male identifying
That is
as
the
a
wrong
woman
video.
wanted to compete. Do you feel
Whoops.
Gotta love the live show. So yeah, we're gonna be talking about this Pew Research survey. If we're looking at it right here, it's those nasty U.S. Catholics that people love to make fun of, but we got some stats. Basically how this survey was conducted, and I looked into this a little bit. It's done through mail, so it's just sent out by the U.S. Postal Service to see, who wants to participate, self-identified. They used addresses of people that were Catholic, and then they also used some online information as well. So if we hop into the first observation, today 20% of U.S. adults describe themselves as Catholic. This percentage is generally stable since 2014, slightly lower than in 2007 when 24% of U.S. Catholics identified as Catholic. Was that surprising to you guys? 20% of U.S. adults? High, low?
I mean, I think that's consistent with what we've always used here at Catholic Vote, or at least that's what Brian has always used.
That 20% benchmark?
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. That's a lot of people. I mean,
Tom might know better, but I feel like that's consistent. I wasn't surprised with that.
Yeah, generally that statement that Tom might know better is always true, but in this case, no, I'd agree with it with you. You'd always want to see it higher, and as much negative as there is in the culture, it kind of makes me proud when I realize like Biden is targeting 20% of the population, the Catholics. Mm-hmm. So we might not be the majority, except we certainly aren't a silent minority.
Yeah.
Love that.
It's interesting to think about how we talk about how Catholics really could have a serious impact. Actually, they decide the presidential election, I think, is what we use internally at Catholic Vote. We think about 20% of the population, man. If you could get 20% of the population doing anything, that could just completely shift the tide of who wins an election or what happens.
Yeah, totally swing an election.
So number 2, we have most U.S. Catholics are white, but a third are Hispanic. So no surprise on the Hispanic part kind of growing here. But yeah, primarily white. That's not too much of a shock, I think, to me. Catholics tend to be older in America as well, older than Americans overall. So nearly 6 in 10 Catholic adults, 58%, are ages 50 and older. You want to talk about demographic winter? Could potentially be hitting that pretty soon. So number 4, roughly 3 in 10 U.S. Catholics live in the South. Well, 26% live in the Northeast, 24% in the West, and 21% in the Midwest. I wouldn't have guessed that the Midwest would be the smallest. That's total bias because I've lived in the Midwest my whole life. But I guess there is a lot, like the Bible Belt kind of runs through that, I guess. But I would think the South would be more Protestant.
That was the thing that I thought. Now that I'm here in the South, as it are, or in Texas, I would have guessed it to be more in the Midwest as well.
Yeah, I mean there are states without Catholic conferences in the South, so you would think.
Oh, really?
I think it's I'll get in trouble if I get it wrong, but I think it's Oklahoma. We were trying to talk to somebody. Or no, Alabama.
I was going to say, I know someone from the Catholic Conference in Oklahoma.
Yeah, so do I. Hopefully he's not listening right now. But in Alabama, we were trying to find one recently, of course, with the IVF stuff there, and there was nobody we could talk to. And most of the people I know in the South are Southern Baptists.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This might be a total tangent, but I feel like I need to throw this up there. This is this account on Twitter called Midwest versus Everybody, and it's ranking every Midwest state. And I knew what I was doing by sending this out to the entire organization. I knew it was going to ruffle some feathers, and I hit my mark with Kara. Let me see. Let me see if I can have you throw this up. I'll throw it in the private chat here.
Are you going to give my hot take away right here, right now?
This was your hot take? What do you mean?
Well, that Ohio is not part of the Midwest.
That's a hot take?
Yeah, I feel like it is.
But why would Ohio? Yeah, wait, where would Ohio be?
I mean, Ohio is East Coast to me.
I don't know if I'm going to join you on that one.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. It's a hot take.
it doesn't touch the coast. It's surrounded by a lot of water.
Yeah.
Right. But I would say past Indiana, like that's the Midwest. And then you've got Nebraska, and I would not even put Colorado in the Midwest. I don't think it's on that chart.
Colorado.
I think the Midwest is like Nebraska, Kansas, and it stops at Indiana. Ohio is East Coast time. We're
gonna move past Kara's Ohio thoughts, although it didn't make it very high in this ranking. So for those on the live stream, S is the top tier, S tier, and then it was A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay, and this is gonna be, I knew what I was doing by throwing this in the chat, but Minnesota and Wisconsin in S tier at the top. Wisconsin, yes, I get Wisconsin. Minnesota, stretch. No. I don't know if we have Minnesota people, but definitely not the top.
It is the land of 1,000 lakes, but
I guess, but you could go Michigan, and Michigan has arguably the best place to summer in the country on that west side. I mean, again, my bias is coming out, but aren't we all? I'm from the Midwest. I mean, Kara, you spent a good amount of time in there. So,
I'm from the Midwest. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Minnesota, too high. I'd say Wisconsin's pretty sick. I give Wisconsin a lot of beer, good time. I would agree. And then A tier right below it, we have Michigan and Iowa. I don't know about Iowa, guys. Do you have any Iowa defenders?
I also was shocked at that one.
Yeah, I feel like this was just intentionally made to rile people up, and hopefully it's accomplishing it. So B tier, we have Illinois.
Is it because it's recently there were Iowa caucuses and people are paying attention to Iowa?
Yeah, it's like a politics thing.
I don't know.
I mean, I don't even know what Iowa has other than corn.
They have Iowa, the Hawkeyes. They have Caitlin Clark.
Well,
State Fair. They have fuel made out of corn.
Yeah.
Fair point.
They have a lot of tractors. Okay, so we're going to move on. So we have Illinois and Indiana in B tier. Now, I think Indiana appropriately placed, and that's as someone who lives in Indiana, but Illinois, a little high. Outside of Chicago, I mean, Chicago everyone's going to talk about, but Chicago kind of, I feel like, neutralizes itself because it's good in some ways and bad in a lot of others.
True, unfortunately. Greatest city in the world, but it has.
Oh yeah, this is literally why. This is why I sent it, because Kara's a Chicagoan. I knew she would snap on this, and I knew she'd be coming out the gate swinging at people, and I succeeded. She came and swung at everyone about Chicago.
Chicago, the greatest city in the world.
Yeah,
I'm sorry if you could be taken out by a cow.
Well, that was a long time ago. Mrs. Murphy's cow. Come on.
So, yeah, we'll run through the rest quick. Missouri, Kansas, North Dakota, South Dakota. And then in last place, we have Nebraska and Ohio. And if anything, I think Ohio's rated a little bit high.
Also concur.
In last place, yeah. Rated a little high in last place. All right, we got to get back to the Catholicism thing. So we got to sign back. I think we can go through the rest here, but the biggest one that stuck out is, and we focus on this a lot at Catholic Vote, about 3 in 10 U.S. Catholics, 28%, say that they attend Mass weekly or more often. Now that's pause. Mm-hmm. What are we doing here? We have Catholics that don't attend Mass?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that's traditionally also been the case.
So they're capturing people that consider themselves culturally Catholic, or like maybe even ethnically Catholic a little bit when you talk about Italians or immigrants, right? Because otherwise, like, why would you call yourself Catholic? You don't go to Mass.
I do wonder, like, are there numbers pre-COVID and post-COVID, if the numbers fluctuated at all? Because I do think a lot of some of those weekend warriors that we got that would go to Mass every Sunday, when they're told they don't have to by the hierarchy, I wonder, because I have friends who decided just not to go back.
Really?
And
I've heard lots of stories about that.
And these are people that previously were attending Mass every Sunday.
Right.
Wow.
And they just don't understand how that is a sin. It's an easier, just all God is asking you is once a week, show up. That's not all he's asking, but that's the first thing he's asking.
Well, I think that it points to a broader problem of the hierarchy and what I'm reminded of the Flannery O'Connor quote, if the Eucharist is just a symbol, then to hell with it. And right. I think that's kind of what so many of young adults even kind of experienced throughout COVID. if this is just what if we're okay with shutting the churches down, then why am I going back?
Yeah, I guess offering some tough love. Like if you were going to mass before and you were told not to go to mass and you still see no problem with it, were you really properly catechized and or experienced the Eucharist as you should have? Because if you did experience the Eucharist as you should have, and you do acknowledge it as the body and blood, soul and divinity of Jesus Christ, then that's where you should be all the time. I mean, regardless of just on Sunday, like properly understood, that's the summit of our faith. So maybe that's more of just a catechesis problem to begin with, or maybe it's a liturgy or reverence problem where people are going to mass before if they feel like it was so just kind of whatever. I was just doing it because I was told to, and now I'm not told to anymore, so I don't have to go.
I mean, I think there's a lot to unpack here too. I think it really kind of points to even the reverence that you see in churches or what people wear to church. If you were going to meet with the King of the Universe, would you be in your Steelers jersey going to do that? No, you wouldn't. Like if you went to see the Queen of England, rest in peace, Queen Elizabeth, but you would put your finest on. And I think there's a lot of pieces to that you could kind of start to unpack and realize where the problems, I mean, there's a lot of different problems like that. So it's not that surprising to me.
Yeah.
It's on the dressing for church, and my dad is probably thankful that he's no longer with us, that I'm reciting the story. But when I was in college, I had to go in front of a judge, and I violated a noise ordinance. It wasn't anything too wild, but it was the first time I was going to court. My dad, who was a lawyer and a judge, and I said to him, like, what should I do? He goes, first thing, do you have your suit? Wear your suit. And I showed up in my suit. I was like 20th in line, and the judge goes, you come up here, brings me up to his front, and like dismisses the charges, just like, just don't do it again. And to me, that stuck in my mind when I go to mass that, okay, if this is how I show respect for the judge, the least I could do is do that for the judge of the universe.
Yeah, the divine judge.
That's a great
point. Yeah, it is. I learned how to, I always was like taught to dress well for mass, but I had an experience in high school. I joined a debate team, and a part of the debate team was everyone had to wear suits, men and women. I think it was like pantsuits for women or something, like basically just dress formally. And it was actually surprising to me after learning how to dress. Basically, you had to go get the suit, you had to go get the tie, you had to present yourself. That was all a part of the philosophy of persuasion, right? Like in what you were saying about getting in front of a judge, it's about respect for your opponents, for the judge, for everyone there. And after I had that experience, I think I didn't realize after that how much that art has been lost in secular society as a whole. I think we've gotten very casual to the point where there's a little bit of a pushback now. I see actually probably better dressed. Maybe this is just me as a child, but the churches I go to, at least, people are much better dressed now than I remember as a child. Maybe it's a little bit of a reversion there.
Well, and I think you too. Go ahead, Tom.
At St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York, for funerals, men are required to wear dresses now. Sorry, Cara.
It's okay.
Please say something probably more relevant.
Didn't see
you
that.
Made me lose my thought. Well, I was going to say that in my travels, one thing when I'm going to all these different churches, and you can always tell how reverent or how devout maybe a church is based on what people are, how they're dressed, if they have adoration, confession times, like how actually Catholic they are and not just culturally Catholic.
For sure.
The Latin Mass right before, my wife and I go to the Mass right after the Latin Mass at our church, and it's one of the few churches in the area that allows Latin Mass. Everybody is always impeccably dressed.
Yep.
And my wife loves it. Even a number of the women are wearing hats and things like that, proper hats. I think you're 100% on.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Anyone that's ever been to a Latin Mass has seen that. No question. It's kind of like the dirty, like, I don't know why people look at it and they're like, I wonder what's going on. I wonder why it's super reverent here and people dress really well. It seems like people care about what they're doing. I can guarantee you the Latin Mass people did not stop going to Mass. That's all I have to say. So if we move on to the next,
experience.
Yeah, personal experience. So they the next observation is about half of Catholic registered voters, 52%, identify or lean towards the Republican Party, while 44% affiliate with the Democratic Party. I mean, this is our bread and butter here at Catholic Vote. It does surprise me that we still have cultural, and I don't know if this is like a historical thing, because I think historically Catholics were Democrats, if you think of like John F. Kennedy, things like that. So maybe there's still some sticking around, but it almost surprised me. Like, when are we going to wake up and see? I mean, we were talking about earlier of like all the persecutions of Catholics going on right now across the country, even if you think about the FACE Act or things like that. How could it really, Joe Biden's technically Catholic, I guess. He probably put Catholic on this form. Yeah, I don't know. I was a little bit surprised by this one. I thought it would be lower Democrat. And it is pretty low, I guess. Any general thoughts on that?
This is going to be another hot take. I'm full of hot takes today, but one of the Catholic Vote, old Catholic Vote bumper stickers says, "I'm Catholic and I vote." And I always hated that because, to your point, like Joe Biden could put that on his car or could wear it or claim that. And I'm like, well, okay, you are totally espousing all things opposite of what it means to be Catholic, but yet you identify as Catholic and go to mass. And I don't even know why I put that in air quotes, but he's, as we all know, he's just like not what he espouses and says that he is the very opposite of how he acts in public. And so I always just kind of cringed at that phrase.
Yeah. And the follow-up makes sense too. So this was, I think, the big headline grabber was 6 in 10 Catholics say abortion should be legal. The actual quote started off with, while the Catholic Church opposes abortion, about 6 in 10 Catholics say abortion should be legal. This includes 39% who say it should be legal in most cases and 22% who say it should be legal in all cases. Roughly 4 in 10 Catholics say abortion should be illegal in most, that's 28%, or in all 11% cases. So we're seeing a clear catechesis problem here. Clear.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, and I can't see how the question was actually asked. Because if you are a Catholic and asking that question, murder should be somewhere in that question.
Right.
Because that is how we view it. It's unfortunately just what we've seen. People are culturally Catholic. I'm afraid what we're seeing now are people are culturally pro-life. I'm pro-life till it's not cool or it's not going to make me walk the plank.
Right. Okay. I can't get elected. And I think that probably the biggest takeaway from this survey is I lack a proper understanding of Catholic demographics in America. And I know at Catholic Vote, we chose to focus on mass attending Catholics because then those typically are better catechized. They're more in line with magisterium teaching and how it applies to how they vote and how they live their lives, things like that. But I still think there's such a larger than, especially people listening to this podcast there's a larger cultural Christianity that is much more appealing and safe, I think, to a lot of people than actually living out what many would consider the radical teachings of the Catholic Church. One that really stuck out to me.
The radical teachings of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's not like the church came out of nowhere. It's the bridegroom of Christ. So, the one that really stuck out to me is the actor from Reacher. His name's Alan Ritchson. He got universal praise from Hollywood and Occupy Democrats for going after Trump, saying that he is the party of rapists, that he's a bad man. He's not Christian. It's crazy to him that Christians vote for him. And his whole story was he kind of came out as a Christian in Hollywood. And of course, they covered him in glowing fashion, saying, wow, he really risked his whole career to be Christian in Hollywood, basically. And then you stop and think about it. And okay, he says he's Christian, but he espouses all of the popular beliefs of Hollywood and like taking a shot at Trump is like the easiest, safest thing you could possibly do right now. If anything, it would be a lot more challenging to say, well, President Biden's Catholic, but he supports abortion up to the second of birth, and he actually makes that the centerpiece of his campaign. Or, oh, well, he's announcing transgender day of visibility on Easter. Like that seems strange. Mm-hmm. He's prosecuting pro-lifers with the FACE Act. that seems strange. So it's like you can be Christian and or Catholic, and basically take all the teeth out of it, everything that would make you potentially unpopular or unsavory to different industries, especially Hollywood here, and that's fine. It's like you can have your little cross as long as you use my pronouns, basically. And so that's what I thought of when this whole thing came up.
That's the exact kind of Christian that Hollywood wants. Is the only in church silent Christian, and then compare it with, because even the roles he chooses to play, compare that with a Jim Caviezel or a Kevin James or a Patricia Richardson, or even a Kirk Cameron, who's not Catholic, but he wouldn't even kiss a woman not his wife in one of his movies.
Yeah.
So I support more of those who practice their faith in public than I do those who are trying to have it both ways.
Well, you know what's funny is like, and this is actually similar. This is actually closer to Jesus's life and his teachings. Is if you follow me, there will be sacrifices. My teachings will turn brother against brother, mother against son. And so if your brand of Christianity is not upsetting anyone, or it means that you are not sacrificing anything in your land, maybe you need to start and think about what your Christianity means or what your Catholicism means. The way of the cross is not a popular one, not one that's going to gain you a lot of roles, probably. Mm-hmm. That's why Mel Gibson can't make any movies in Hollywood right now. Like if you go look at people that are blackballed, a lot of them actually made real sacrifices. And so I think about that way when like, maybe I just need to, whenever I hear Catholics are in support of this, it's important to do that 20% distinction or the 28% distinction of there's a large proportion of them that are that safe of the world Catholicism. And then there's that 28% that are probably, actually following church teaching.
Mm-hmm. Well, what is it that Jesus said? The world will hate you, but remember, it hated me first.
Amen. I agree with that. And then kind of along this similar note, I saw an announcement about Baltimore. So the Archdiocese of Baltimore has decided that they're going to be closing parishes. So they're going to cut 40 of its 61 parishes. It's of their Seek the City to Come initiative. 40 of 61. I mean, we're talking about that's a majority of their parishes in Baltimore. That's just nuclear option. The faith is completely dying in Baltimore. That is crazy. They cited maintenance costs, low mass attendance, and multiple unmet opportunities to better serve the needs of the broader community. And simultaneously, they made another decision as of March 13th, because of Traditionis Custodes. They are not allowing Latin Mass in any parishes. They're allowing the parishes that allow it to expire in August, and it's going to be relegated to a single shrine in Baltimore. And this is from the bishop. We have not connected well to our neighborhoods as we want to. We want to shift away from giving so much to buildings to give more to people and focus more on mission than maintenance.
Yikes.
Thoughts?
It hits doubly hard when you think that Maryland really is the birthplace of the Catholic Church in the United States.
Yeah, Lord Baltimore.
It's where our first bishop came from. And I disagree with some of the decisions made here, but Archbishop Lloyd normally is one of the good ones when you're talking about trying to get things done at the bishops' conference and things along those lines. So it is very disappointing. And I also wonder at the same time how much some of the lawsuits maybe played into it as well.
Yeah.
I know that's
a good point. I didn't think about that.
That's been, I mean, in Philadelphia or in Pennsylvania and things like that with some of the churches closing. But the churches there are beautiful. I can't imagine. I mean, what are they going to do with these buildings? And some of them are centuries old.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Even
probably go back to the founding. Yeah. I mean, all of this screams, though, a lot of the observations we just put up, right? Even the idea that, like, it reminds me of kind of the classic, why doesn't the Catholic Church just sell everything it owns and give it to the poor, is kind of missing the point. And Adamo in the chat was saying, transitioning from theocentric to anthropocentric story of our times. I mean, yeah, it just seems like there's a real fundamental misunderstanding of what the role of a church in a community as a center of worship and a center of beauty is. Either the Vatican or the bishops aren't communicating that well enough, or they've just given up on that mission themselves.
Both.
Yeah. And also there's probably just they're probably serious about lack of mass attending Catholics from the COVID perspective, as you said, but then also people that don't see the point. Like if you don't see the point of the Eucharist, you don't see the point of the Mass, then you're probably not going to go. And even with this poll, you saw that most Catholics actually don't attend Mass. 28% of Catholics attend Mass weekly or more than that. So yeah, we're going to be running into these issues, I'm sure, in new states. I don't think Baltimore is probably the last one that's going to have to make decisions like this. Vocations crisis. I mean, we could go on and on about all the reasons.
And related to the Latin Mass, because in Washington, D.C., which is the neighboring archdiocese, and under Bishop Gregory, he completely stopped the Latin Mass. And there's this one beautiful old church, St. Mary's. I think it's like the second oldest in the U.S. Capitol, and they stopped the Latin Mass. And then somebody went to the Latin Mass, did all the figuring, and figured out that about 90% of the volunteers for the church for handling different festivals and things like that went to the Latin Mass. About 75% of their donations came from the people who went to the Latin Mass, because it was just about the only one in the area. And now the church is at a place where it's like it's right downtown DC, so it's selling off its parking lot. It's struggling to keep both parishioners. It just seems like we're cutting off our own hands to accommodate the needs of today instead of thinking about the needs of the future.
Right.
Wasn't it Pope Benedict who said the church is going to get smaller but stronger?
Smaller, more fervent church.
That's what I think of when I read about this Baltimore.
Yeah, and
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with that. And we might be seeing a very different survey 10 years down the road because a lot of those aging Catholics are going to pass away. And all of the vibrant...
I'm sitting right here, Tom.
Tom, of course I wasn't talking about you. You're the picture of health. Don't worry. But when I go to places that are vibrant, they're full of young people. They're full of young families. They're full of young kids. I think we keep saying it, and I think it's going to come. I'm going to keep saying it for a couple more years now, but that's the future of the church.
If your church ain't crying, it's dying. That's the motto of my church.
I think we had a first communion. We're not a big church. We had a first communion. I think like 30 kids. We have a small church. 30 kids got their first communion. That's only from one Mass. And then the Latin Mass, I think, was much bigger than that because we do an English Mass and a Latin Mass. And I look at that and it gives me so much hope. Like this is the future of the church. People that are there getting their kids confirmed at a beautiful church like ours is like, it makes me excited for the future. But to Tom's point, some of these decisions are definitely going to come to impact them.
Well, and there's so many young priests too. You mentioned like priest crisis. And I feel like there's a lot of young priests. If you're going into the priesthood or becoming a priest now, you're one of those, as I like to call them, like a John Paul II priest, and you are doing it not because you are trying to hide from something or there's nothing else better to do with your life. You're doing it because you're convicted and you're wanting to give your life in service to Christ and his church. And so I think that in and of itself is going to help the church get stronger, even as we get smaller.
My big thing on that is, and maybe this is what you were meaning by John Paul II type priest, you don't gain anything other than being serious about becoming a priest now. Like, I think even in society, priests are basically ridiculed. It's brought up with the sex abuse crisis. It's not a glamorous, maybe it was at one point, but it definitely is not now. The only reason you would become a priest now is because you're convicted. I don't think there's no social status pro. It's not a money thing. Like the next wave are going to come in, I think, for the right reasons. I think we've hopefully cleared out some of the, what do they call them, like pink palaces back in the day.
Right.
I don't even want to go down that rabbit hole, but yeah.
We will later. Twilight Zone.
Okay. Yeah. Don't tease it too much, but yeah, we still deal with those issues within our church. But I had a few lawfare points I wanted to make, and I think it's nice having Tom here as the resident DC guy. Although I guess these are kind of happening in New York City. But so there's two things. One, the Supreme Court of the United States had a hearing on Tuesday, and it was about a case brought forward from a former Pennsylvania police officer. He's facing charges for his conduct at the Capitol 2021, January 6th. And this potential hearing could upend the sentences for more than 300 defendants and also could potentially have impacts on 2 of the charges that are currently levied against Donald Trump. So the case is called Fischer versus United States, and it's about this kind of obscure, it's called Sarbanes-Oxley Act. Sorry if I mispronounced that. 2002. It was enacted in the wake of the Enron scandal to prevent the destruction of evidence in financial crimes. And it can be used against alleged participants in the events of January 6th, which disrupted congressional certification of the electoral votes from the 2020 presidential election. So the statute itself would make it a crime to alter, destroy, mutilate, or conceal a record, document, or other object in an effort to impair an investigation, but also includes a catch-all provision for conduct that otherwise obstructs, influences, or impedes any official proceeding. The kicker on this is that the statute carries a 20-year maximum sentence, and the Supreme Court, the majority of the justices, 6 of them, are skeptical of how this is being used because of the broad application. Obviously, I brought up this had to do with Enron and destroying financial documents. So how are we now charging it with people that were at the Capitol? And not just a small amount, 300 this has been used on now. And so Justice Roberts had the main skepticism, which, the law has been used to prosecute financial crimes. Why is this all of a sudden being used against protesters? And there's a few other things I could think of, opportunities I could think of where you could use this, specifically the people that stormed the Kavanaugh hearings. Surprisingly, this wasn't used on any of them, or on Jamal Bowman, who pulled the fire alarm to stop a procedural vote in the House. Maybe pro-Palestinian sit-ins, blocking roads for people to get in for votes. How broad do we want to apply this? So the questions seemed like the 6 conservative justices were very skeptical of the application of this and could have a lot of impact on Trump and others. But I think the big thing, and I want to ask you, Tom, this seems like it seems like signifying the lawfare that we've seen over the past few years. It's kind of like being a little bit let known to the public here and getting to the Supreme Court, how much we've just internalized how much the federal government has been weaponized to attack political opponents.
And in this case, Donald Trump. And you also have to remember that 6 of these justices also were targeted a lot of these same mobs even before the Dobbs decision was released, and their homes were threatened. So I think they understand that freedom sometimes comes with a price that includes allowing these protests. I'm not in support of the January 6th. Those who went into the Capitol unlawfully, what they did was wrong. How they're being treated, I think, is a bigger injustice, though. Some of them have been left in prison this whole time while they're waiting for a court date with no explanation or any ability to get out. And this lawfare, it's to discredit Donald Trump and discredit Republicans because they can't go after our policies, so they're going to go after the people who are pushing it. And with Trump, it's kind of like a spaghetti against the wall thing. They tried down in Georgia. There's another case in New York as well. 2 cases in New York. One, though, dealing with some of his business dealings, which makes like he overestimated one of his properties, which, I mean,
there was no victim, no crime. He got a loan based on an evaluation he made himself and paid back the loan. Everyone made money, and now all of a sudden it's somehow a federal crime.
And heads up, when I sell my house, I'm going to try to get the best price I can out of it. So I might up the price a little as well. Right. So if the New York,
glad you're not in New York, Tom.
If Bragg wants to come after me, then he can.
Yeah. So you alluded to this Manhattan case too, and that whole thing is such a circus as well. So right now he's being charged by a novel crime that no American has ever been charged for before. The charge, first off, has been elevated by the district attorney, Alvin Bragg, from a misdemeanor to a felony. So first off, made up charge. Second off, elevated it from a misdemeanor to a felony, which
I'm pretty sure he's known for doing the opposite, right?
Good call, Kara. So he actually in 2022 lowered 50% of his felonies to over 50% of his felonies to misdemeanors in 2022, even violent crimes. So we're not talking about a hard on crime individual here. He just felt it necessary to elevate to a felony. So the novel financial crime has to do with violating campaign finance laws by not disclosing a payment, which they're calling a hush money payment, to Stormy Daniels. So the interesting thing about this is that nobody has ever been charged with failing to disclose hush money payments on a government or even corporate finance form. So this isn't even like a private sector, public sector thing. It's literally never happened before. And so the effects of this are he has to be in person in this courthouse, so he can't go campaign, which first thing that comes to mind is this feels like political attack here. And then he wasn't even allowed to go to his son's high school graduation. So there's so much. Of course, you go see the Truth Social from Trump. I mean, he's upset, understandably, but it's less about it's a total spaghetti on the wall situation, and this feels so targeted. There's no other way to put it. Like, everything is so unusual about these crimes and the way that they're being prosecuted.
And one thing I think, because he said he can't campaign, except one thing I think the left just doesn't seem to understand is, as they're trying to paint this broader picture of Trump, whenever they do something like this, his fundraising goes through the roof.
Right.
He's probably sitting back and going like, hey, Wisconsin, don't you have anything you want to charge me for? Or Michigan, come on.
And that's kind of my thought, Tom. So then question to you, is the hope that one of these sticks, he somehow gets convicted and that keeps him from becoming president? Because otherwise it backfires and he gets more attention and more money.
What they're trying to do, and they did this during the campaign, and I think they regret they didn't do this in 2015, 16 when he was running, because everybody was like, oh, Trump is running. That's a joke. Until he got elected, and he kind of governed as, if not a full conservative, at least more conservative than presidents we've seen in the past. So what they're trying to tarnish his reputation and tarnish his image, so that anything he tries to do, if he does get reelected, will be tarnished, and they'll fight it all along the way. So the squishy Republicans in Congress won't vote for it. The Mitt Romneys, and the like, who have always been against Trump, and to be honest, against conservative principles as well.
I heard someone the other day say Mitt McCain, and I was like, pretty good.
Mitt Romney, man.
At least John McCain fought for a country.
True.
Kara, any general thoughts on the lawfare?
No, I mean, I think you hit the nail on its head. Every time they try to come after Trump like this, it makes him stronger. And I mean, he's said it multiple times. I'm the only thing standing between the government and them doing this to you. And you can kind of see that when he takes this sort of heat.
You have this supposedly working guy from Scranton is one presidential candidate. The other is this billionaire from New York City. And we empathize with a billionaire from New York City more because he understands how a lot of Americans are feeling. We're feeling like our government is not there for us. It's against us.
Against us, yeah.
The regulations that are out there, after 2016, and I would talk to business, and I was with the March for Life, except I talked to different business owners around the U.S., looking for donors. And most of them would go, because I'm like, what is the best thing you like about this administration? Is it the judges? Is it the what? All of them to a T would go the regulations. The regulations of getting government off of our back allows us to expand our businesses and also help great organizations like the March for Life or Catholic Vote.
Yeah. Oh, Tom, well, we have you, DC local. There's some drama over the Ukraine funding right now. So there's another bill being cooked up by the Speaker of the House to potentially send more money over to Ukraine. It's been very contentious. It was shot down when it was paired with the border funding bill. Just from your perspective, I know there's some drama about him potentially being ousted as Speaker. What are you kind of hearing on the ground in DC?
I knew Mike Johnson, I think even before he ran for Congress. He definitely comes from our ranks. He was a lawyer for Alliance Defending Freedom, but that doesn't mean I think he's qualified to be Speaker of the House. And unfortunately, I think we're seeing that. And it is unfortunate. But a few weeks ago, even months ago, Speaker Johnson was saying, my top priority is the border. My top priority is the border, because guess what? For a lot of Americans, the top priority is the border. When they go into a voting booth, they don't think about, oh, I wonder how this guy handled Ukraine, or anything like that. They think about, is this guy going to protect my homestead, my country? And I'll think about Ukraine later, except I need to make sure my family's safe first. And he has just totally dropped that to the point where he's not even allowing amendments on the border to be involved in these packages. If he'll be ousted or not, I mean, I talked to a couple of members over the last couple of days. Many, and a lot of them do not want him ousted because they don't want the circus while they're running for re-election. Except as one put it to me just this morning, it was, well, I don't see, if it does come up, I don't see how you vote for Speaker Johnson after everything he hasn't done. However, they don't think that either Thomas Massey or Marjorie Taylor Greene will actually pull the trigger.
Tom, can I ask, why do you think he's changed his tune? You said he came in with his priority being the border, and now he's with all this Ukraine stuff, no amendments.
If I can put my tinfoil hat on for this one.
So good, Tom.
Props.
They always work so well on audio. Except he gets into power. And it goes back to the glossary I talked about a few weeks ago. He starts learning all these things and gets the attitude of, I know better now. Instead of somebody like one of my favorite members of Congress is Bob Good from Virginia, because other members of Congress tell me whenever he's in a meeting, they feel like they're in with one of their constituents. The way he talks about life and the way he talks about marriage and the budget. They're very informed constituent. And that's why he's like my favorite member, because he's actually representing the people that elected him. But with Speaker Johnson, I think it was just a matter of he got overwhelmed. Perhaps he's getting bad advice, but staff is never the problem. Leadership is leadership.
Yeah.
And I just think he's listening more to Mitch McConnell and Joe Biden than he is to some of the people he should more be listening to. So
2 follow-up questions. One, if you said, he might not have been prepared to be a good speaker, might be a good person, could be a friend. What does it take? Like, what would your ideal good speaker look like? What does it take to be good at the role?
I normally say you never want one of your friends to become speaker or in leadership, because you have to compromise. There is because you have this big tent. A big tent usually means you have to deal with a lot of clowns. So that means Mike Johnson, who's conservative as conservative can be, except he's got those pro-abortion New Yorkers, he's got to make sure they're happy as well, and they're getting some things that they need. And it's a very delicate balance that sometimes you want somebody who's more of a negotiator than someone who's 100% on your side. Because Mike Johnson, as a representative Johnson, is 100% on our side. But the stuff that he's let go through as speaker, I mean, funding for abortion facilities, funding for organizations that push transmutilation on children. These are not things a conservative Republican not only would vote for, but in this case, he's defending.
Yeah. So, and
you
then
kind of just made an interesting case for Trump there. Negotiator, right?
Indeed.
I think the only thing
you want to hire your best friend to clean out your sewer.
Street brawler.
Right. I think the one thing that would save him and keep him I hope he stays speaker till the end. I hope he has a turnaround and remembers Representative Johnson and because he is a very good man. But the only thing I think that would keep him in the speakership if Donald Trump wins the election is if Donald Trump full-throatedly endorses him. And even that might be questionable because Mike Johnson right now is ticking off a lot of his allies. So
one thing that I wanted to follow up with too, I think people instinctively understand that they do not want more funding to go to Ukraine, that we've already spent billions of dollars. It doesn't feel right. But I think Catholics and other people maybe as well, they don't have the specific reasons to articulate why funding should not be going to Ukraine. So if you could give people a few things to latch on here, I know you've really thought this out and have researched it. Why should people be skeptical about continuing to send this kind of money to Ukraine, ethically or otherwise?
Well, Heritage has some great stuff out on this. They're about the only large organization who's been very vocal. However, one, there's very little oversight to no oversight. Over $1 billion worth of equipment has gone missing. $1 billion. And in this world, I mean, it's very dangerous to have it out there, have that equipment out there.
It reminds me a lot of Afghanistan. Like, we basically armed Afghanistan with American weapons.
Right. And if you ask, like I've asked Mitch McConnell's staff about this, Joe Biden has also said this publicly. If you ask them why are we in Ukraine? How is this in the American interests? Their first answer was, well, this benefits 38 states. That the weapons, the states are creating or building the weapons. This benefits those states, so it's good for the American economy. And get this, it doesn't cost any American lives. And I sounded America first before, except I'm not looking for America to profit on lives of people in other countries either. So there doesn't seem to be, yes, Russia is the bad guy. It doesn't make Ukraine automatically the good guy. And if there is a moral argument for the war, I don't think I've heard it articulated yet, other than we need to stop the really bad guy. And there's no articulation that if you keep on funding and sending $1 trillion or so to the Ukraine, is that going to solve anything? Is Russia going to all of a sudden be like, oh, well, we're just going to back off? Only winter seems to make the Russians stop fighting.
Well, the other obvious too is the complete neglect of the homeland and our own border. I think that's the easiest one to latch on to for people.
Yeah, and that's the if we're going to be spending, and not that the border is solved by money. Our border, I think it's more solved, as Donald Trump showed, by having the right policies enforced at the border. But I'd rather the attention was there than over in the Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Kara, the Toms have done a lot of talking today. We are going to allow you to go first in Twilight Zone, and you have,
well,
you have what I'm excited
before we
for.
move to the Twilight Zone, I really just need to ask Tom, why and how did you have a tinfoil hat ready? That was amazing.
I might have had it set up for an earlier one, and it just seemed fitting.
Okay.
I don't normally my tinfoil hat I keep down in my basement.
I've hosted like over 100 of these shows, and I never thought to do that. And it took you coming on to rip a tinfoil hat on me, which is just
it was just like so perfectly timed. You just like reached over and
as they say, comedy is all timing.
All right, now's the time. Now's the time for Kara. You have the floor for Twilight Zone.
So my Twilight Zone today. This is Rupnik, Father Rupnik, Marko Rupnik. He is the credibly accused Jesuit whose artwork is all over the world. Notable places like Fatima, Lourdes, the National Shrine in DC.
The Vatican website.
Yep, the Vatican website. He underwent an investigation, was declared excommunicated in 2020, and then the CDF lifted the excommunication after he repented. A year later, the same congregation decided not to prosecute him after another allegation of spiritual and sexual abuse of a former nun came up. In February of this year, Gloria, the former nun, Gloria, I forget her last name, made her story public for the first time, and it was really harrowing and brutal to listen to. But despite all of that, he was removed from the Jesuits.
Not for the sexual abuse, by the way.
Right, not for the sexual abuse, because
it was
he wouldn't
for disobedience.
Superiors, correct. Despite all of that, he is in the 2024 Vatican yearbook of sorts, listed as a consultor to the liturgical dicastery. So that's just
that's awesome.
A major whiplash. Why? Even if this was sent to the publisher last year before he was removed, They could have issued a correctional, but they haven't. So I would assume that this stands, which is just abhorrent in every level.
Kara, this guy, surely he's not a priest right now, right? He's not.
Oh, yeah. It's interesting you asked that, Tom. He still is a priest.
Even with all the new commitments to accountability, transparency from the Vatican. And
yep. We've got some major double talk happening.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Here we don't just have like an artist, but a cleric who used his sacred office to perpetrate unspeakable crimes and sins.
Yeah, I think the excommunicable offense was that he was trying to absolve someone from a sin that he committed, sexual sin that he forced them to commit.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yikes.
Which is
and
really,
it's not like this art is just like, oh, he took some mushrooms and started doing art. The art is inspired by his sexual impropriety with.
Well, it's interesting that you also bring up his art, because maybe this is the third hot take for today. I do not think his art is beautiful in any way, shape, or form. I think art is very creepy. Art has this aesthetic appeal that really brings the soul to desire true beauty, which then turns your mind and heart and soul to God's goodness, and it's timeless. And I don't think his is at all. If you even just looking at this photo that we've got up here, you've got these like vacant, dark, dead eyes. It's just not beautiful. It's creepy. You said it perfectly.
It's very creepy. It's unsettling.
So the fact that we've got his artwork up still everywhere,
and it seems to follow you.
It does.
For you.
It does. And I think it's just so, like, I feel so terrible for all of these women who he's abused, that they can't get past this, because we're still treating him like a.
Well, they can't go to Lourdes. They can't imagine going to a holy site and seeing art from someone that
abused you,
sexually abused you in the weirdest possible, like in the grossest.
Believe all women way. Except for when it's
right. Yeah, the Rupnik stuff is like, it's so beyond the pale, and it's such a obvious sign of hypocrisy. He just has the right friends in the right places. Like, because all you need to do is criticize the Pope and you'll get your apartment taken away. Right. Or you'll lose your position. But, you do all this and you get the right friends.
Well, if I'm elected the next Pope, first thing I'm going to do is take that book and just fire everybody in it.
Oh my gosh.
If they're worthy of being rehired, then we can talk. But
we need to fire everyone before we can get to the bottom of this. But there was a notable defender of Father Rupnik, right?
There is, yeah. So that was the other thing that happened this week is Austin. I should know how to pronounce his last name. Ivory. Yeah, he came out defending Rupnik this week and saying that there are other disgraced artists that have created works that we should not totally try to get rid of.
Kara, actually, he said that the people that want it taken down are Puritans. They're not Catholic.
Right.
So, yeah, people that want to take down the rapist-inspired art, they're the Puritans. It's pure iconoclasm. Doesn't allow for grace to supplement sinful nature. Interesting. I'd say if you want to start that game of taking down art from people that were rapists, then let's start with him, and then you can move on to other art. But I don't know why we can't start with this guy. Like, this stuff is disgusting.
Nobody tell his defender that Adolf Hitler was a painter too.
Yeah, and actually wasn't the whole thing that he didn't get accepted into art school, and that's potentially why we had World War II?
Oh, I didn't know that.
I'm pretty sure Hitler was an artist and he didn't get accepted into this art school. Maybe we'd have a much different U.S. history or world history if he would have just been accepted. It's a tortured artist. Well, I can't say that his art would have been good either. It would have been likely up the Rupnik. Probably not, yeah. I'm going to say probably not. Creepy as heck art. All right, Tom. Other Tom. Twilight Zone.
Mine hopefully is a little more lighthearted on that. There's a story recently that a couple of Pacific indigenous leaders from Cook Islands, French Polynesia, New Zealand, and Tonga got together to declare whales and dolphins now have legal personhood. And
Wow.
of course, that this isn't enough. And to me, it's just the irony about how we can declare whales and dolphins and give them personhood, but we can't give human beings personhood if they're still in the womb. And just and you see this all the time too. I remember a couple years back with Congress, like we were trying to get something like the pain capable bill passed, or it might have even been born alive legislation, and we're struggling trying to get enough votes for it. Except there was a bill to protect horses from slaughter that came up, and it was almost unanimous in both chambers of Congress.
Wow.
And I'm not saying horses don't deserve to be protected; they're beautiful animals, and they taste fantastic. However, that taste part was a joke. However, I do think I was America first earlier. Now I'm going to be people first. Before I declare anybody has personhood, I'm going to start with the people who are actually people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was a tweet that went mega viral, and this guy did not attend it at all. But it was a sign outside of a restaurant, and it said "dog friendly, child free." And he's like,
yeah,
"This
I
is
saw
my
that.
kind of place," and everyone just
Totally
this guy,
ratioed
like,
him.
Yeah, it's like the people that put "Who saved who" stickers on the back of their car. Like, it was the epitome of that. But remember, we did. I don't know if you guys were listening to the Loopcast where they discovered how to talk to whales, or
Yes.
they're trying to, or something like that. And they wanted to, like, what would you say when we could talk to them? Say we're sorry. It's the first thing.
That was a
like, we're gonna say
crazy.
sorry to the whales. So,
And hopefully you made a Star Trek Voyage Home reference. Hopefully Josh did.
Josh did in his head.
Okay, where they travel back in time and talk to the whales. Okay,
Yeah,
I'm killing myself.
I am. Yeah, I'm not a Star Trek. Sorry.
Yeah, so that's actually a very strategic part of the Loopcast is whoever we bring on, we need to have one member that is follically challenged and loves Star Trek. So we try to have that in pretty much every episode. It's part of our success.
Unfortunately, I am neither.
Well, I wasn't talking about you, Kara.
Well. You're gonna have
Well. All right, I move to my Twilight Zone now. I actually have a video to play. So this all kind of started with so Riley Gaines was the first domino to fall on a lot of this, but she has started basically publicly advocating to get men out of women's sports at its simplest form. And so now there's people that are a part of this that are going around basically trying to spread this message or going to places where this is getting infected into their local sports. And you'd think places that are safe from this kind of thing, but clearly are not. And I have a crazy video of this girl. I'm just going to play the clip. Go ahead and roll the clip, Simon.
Biological male identifying as a woman wanted. Do you feel if a biological male identifying as a woman wanted to compete? Do you feel that it would be okay for a biological male to transition to a woman and compete against the swimmers here today?
No comment.
I would rather not talk anymore. I just don't want to, I want to stay out.
Okay.
This is
All right, thank you for your time.
This is very scary. Can you take that?
Yikes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, that last guy just. Oh, okay.
Very scary.
I think that last guy was a coach. What kind of ideological gun do we have in people's heads that would make anyone act like this? I can't think of another. I'm trying to think of another question that would ever cause a grown man to completely shrivel into his own body and be so scared of what would come after that he can't even speak. I mean, he could barely get that out of his mouth. And we're talking about this is such a simple, just,
Obvious
hey,
question.
don't have men compete against your daughters. Like that's so simple. Like it is crazy that people are so scared of what's to come. Is punishment even that bad? I don't think the punishment's even that bad to the point that would make you act like that. Sure, you might get a few rainbow profiles like giving you a hard time, but seriously,
there are people, and this is why we shouldn't underplay like the heroism coming from people like Riley Gaines and others who have spoken out, is that you lose your careers over it. Riley Gaines is probably going to have a tough time getting any corporate sponsorships because of her stance, but she doesn't care because it was the right stance. I I'm talking when I was a family research counsel, I was working on the life issue, and I was also working on those who suffer with same-sex attraction issues as well. And a guy came into our building to try to shoot us, not because of my life stance, but because of the stance we had on the other issue. So there is an imbalance there. I think that I think the guy's a total coward, and I would never wear a tie like that in public. However, I'm not going to condemn him for fear of losing his livelihood.
I guess it's all fun and games until you. I completely disagree, Tom. I guess you could say like, oh, you don't know how you're going to act in the situation. I'd rather be unemployed and not a coward. What kind of world are we living in?
I'm right with you, but I'm not going to. I guess I was saying I understand his fear. I don't agree with it, and I think we need to overcome fear like that because. I think what we've seen is when it comes, especially to like the trans agenda and everything like that, that if you push back, you find out you have a lot more people on your side than you originally thought.
That's kind of the thing. And even what you were talking about with Riley Gaines of like, oh, she's going to have a hard time getting a job. But like the amount of, like she was on Joe Rogan, like the amount of exposure she got for basically just saying confidently a truth that everyone understands, even the trans people understand that. She's gotten more support, love, and like opportunities because of that than the other way. Like it always kind of goes back. This reminds me of like people in the beginning of me being a Catholic voter, even with the Loopcast being like, well, what about future jobs, Tom? Like, you know, some of the things you say aren't popular. Are you concerned if you're going to be able to get a job after this? And my answer is always like, it's a great litmus test for places I want to be. Because once you make that sacrifice on your principles, that's not the first one. That's not the first and only thing they're going to ask of you. There's going to be plenty of other morally compromising situations you're going to be put in. And maybe you're going to be miserable for a few years until you finally say something that upsets the right person and you'll be gone. So I'm like, I'm not willing to work at a place that would make me live something that's not true. And I'm going to be just fine. And that's the other thing. Like once you do make the stand and other people do support you because you are being courageous and at least professing the truth, there's always going to be demand for that, even if it's countercultural or you're not going to get to work for Google or whatever. But man, I just cannot say enough how much of a coward that man is and all these people are. And it makes me so mad. That is why we're in this problem. The other problem too is like he's a coach or like those people are parents. Their daughter's in the pool with men, in locker rooms with men. Not even on your own principles. You're talking about the safety of your daughter. You're willing to give up the safety of your own daughter, also that you don't get attacked online or you might not lose your job. Like, at what point, what are you going to stand up for?
I'm not disagreeing with you here, and I'm just saying I understand his fear. I'm not embracing it. And the main reason I brought it up was to highlight that because look, I built my whole career. If you look at my resume, I will never be appointed to an office, to a political position because of my resume, and I'm proud of it. I would not have anything change anything, but except it should give us more of an appreciation for the Riley Gaineses of the world when you see cowards like this not speaking out. And also for the Morton Black Leadership Institute has totally embraced Riley, given her a position, created the Riley Gaines Institute so that she could embrace and give this courage to other female athletes as well. So I guess I'm just trying to contrast. I'm not trying to defend ugly tie guy.
Mm-hmm.
No, I understand, Tom. Sorry, Carrie, did you have anything on that?
I was going to just say that it kind of reminds me of years ago when the Obergefell decision came down. We at Catholic Vote put out a video of young adults who essentially, supported traditional marriage, and it was one of those young adults being asked to participate in a video espousing something, or basically standing up for something that the culture at that point was and still is very against. And there were a lot of folks who I understood their position, similar like what McCluskey is saying. I understand that's a hard position to be put in, but there were multiple folks who said, no, this is the right thing to do. If it causes me to lose my job. I understand not everybody's in that position, but it's a very heroic one. And I think that what Riley's doing is awesome. I wish that there are more people. When we start standing up for that, that's when I think the tide will start to change, because other people will be emboldened by Riley's example. And I mean, even what happened when she came out, there were multiple people that she swam with, Paula Scanlon, who didn't have the courage, but by Riley speaking out and saying something, Paula said, you know what, I'm going to stand up too. And that's how the tide starts to change, when more and more people can stand up and do something and defend truth.
Yeah. Is it a Chesterton quote? It's like, all it takes for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I also think about all the brave young men who were let off at the beaches of Normandy, and they're literally facing war. And then you've got this guy who, oh, don't ask me. Like, I can't.
We're talking about kids too.
Juxtaposition is like so crazy to me.
Those were 18-year-old kids on the beaches of Normandy. And that's a grown man. And the other thing about this too is, like, people love to use Hitler and Nazis and authoritarianism when it serves their purpose, but nothing makes me think of that more than seeing just neutered 1984 type men not being able to proclaim the truth for fear of retribution. And it always reminds me of, like, you know, first they came for the Jews, we did nothing. Then they came for these people, they did nothing. And then all of a sudden, you know, we're in World War II and we're killing millions of people. So it applies here. And I know it's overused, but it's used by the same people. Like, the trans people use that all the time. They're saying they're exterminating them. It's like, man, anyway, we can go on that a lot. I think what stuck out most about that video was just the cowardice of the man. It made me disgusting, sick to my stomach.
What was on his tie? I couldn't see it, but I thought it was interesting that McCluskey, the guy who wears these like awesome, crazy suits all the time, says, I would not wear that tie.
Are they, is that Razorbacks? Is that like, I think that is.
If that's a Razorback, that's Arkansas.
Right. That might be Arkansas.
We could be outing him. Uh-oh.
Not meaning to dox him, but maybe
So he needs a swift kick in the butt, dude.
Parents,
seriously.
don't send your girls to the school.
Men without chests. Anyway, that does it for the Wednesday episode. Tom and Kara, thank you guys for coming on. If you want to help out the show, loopcast@catholicvote.org. You can email me with some mailbag questions or send us a review. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, send us 5 stars. Always appreciate that. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Got a lot of fun new ideas coming there, so you'll want to be there. So like and subscribe there on YouTube. And we're praying for you. Hope you're praying for us. We end with St. Thomas More, Our Lady of Guadalupe, and St. Fidelis. Pray for us. And we will see you guys on the next episode. Peace.